Entities and how to deal with them. This is going to be my guide as to how you, who presumably may be a new player to Nullscape, or someone whom is having trouble with enemies inside of Nullscape, can deal with these enemies effectively and efficiently. This video is going to be split into sections. I'll leave individual timestamps of sections here in case you'd like to skip to a specific portion of the video. With that being said, let's begin. Alright, so first up, what is Nullscape? Nullscape is a collectathon-based roguelite Roblox experience that follows the premise of surviving while collecting all the presents across endless levels with randomly generated paths, while gradually introducing new enemies, upgrades, curses at specific milestones, and classes that offer various gameplay changes for the player. The game is heavily inspired by the overported joke game Wega's Challenge. In other words, Nullscape is a fast-paced action platformer on Roblox where your main goal is to run around floating platforms to collect all the presents hidden on the map. Now, for the most part, that sounds simplistic and easy and bland. However, enemies and curses tend to make the game fairly an entirely different thing. Which brings us to the second section of this video, enemies. Enemies are entities or adversaries that spawn across procedurally generated platforms to hinder your movement and end your run. They are gradually introduced at specific level milestones, usually every other level for choice, and can be modified by specific game curses. There are a variety of enemies you encounter when you first enter the game. Most usually the first few choices will always consist of Bell, Springer, Mart, ICBM, Husk, and Baby. As you continue throughout the game, obviously, you will encounter other curses, but almost always, unless you're doing Chaos mode, these will be your first encounter options. Here's how you deal with each specific option, going by personal preference of explanation for better conceptual understanding. So starting for the easiest of the bunch, we have Bell. Bell is an enemy that can appear starting at level 1. While it is difficult for it to directly kill, it is a hazard that can leave players vulnerable to other threats if avoided incorrectly. All you have to do to avoid Bell is make sure you don't touch it. It's that simple. Bell randomly teleports around, usually near or in front of players, with no indication on when it will teleport. Ringing the bell or touching the bell adds upward velocity, which will in turn fling you upward. If utilized correctly, it can prove to be a very helpful enemy or a savior in some circumstances. In others, it can be harmful. Its knockback will result within a screen distortion and obstruct you along with everyone in the lobby's vision. Given, however, you ring the bell 4 or more times consecutively, you will be given the overturned effect and die. The bell has differentiated audio cues per each hit. Next up, we have Mart. Mart is another fairly easy enemy whom appears from level 1 and forward. He slowly floats toward the player. Mart hovers towards the nearest player at a speed of 10 studs per second. Mart emits both light, which can be seen only if using above 4 graphics on Roblox, and a constant sound which is heard when nearby, killing on contact with the ability to phase through all objects. Mart is very easy to avoid. Just ensure that you don't accidentally run into him and you'll pretty much be alright. Listen for his audio if you cannot see him, as it usually is louder depending on which direction he may be in. Given that he can go under objects and through them, it can be very beneficial. Next in line, we have Springer. Springer is an enemy that can appear starting at level 1 that will jump on random tiles, creating shockwaves, which knocks players back. Sometimes, if given the right scenario, it can land on players, instantly killing them. Springer falls from the sky on a random tile, then proceeds to occasionally jump to random tiles, sometimes intentionally aiming near a player. The best way to counter Springer is to avoid their landing spots. If you cannot get out of the area fast enough, however, try not to let its knockback tarnish your gameplay. You can jump over its shockwave. If you, however, cannot do that, instead position yourself in a direction that will fling you beneficially, or wait for its pass at a lower level if it's elevated. Next up, Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, also known as ICBM. The ICBM is an entity that, like others, will appear from level 1 forward. Periodically, it will lock onto an alive player and follow them from above. After a short warning delay, cued by an audio, it will quickly strike down onto the player and explode upon contact with any given surface. It summons a red crosshair and locks onto a positioning as it starts falling before it explodes. To avoid death by ICBM, simply just walk outside of its range, which is marked by the red crosshair as it expands before exploding. Husk. Husk is an enemy that can appear starting at level 1. Their arrival is cued by a small tune or jingle, if you'd call it that, along with an indicator at spawn point. Husk trails or consistently follows behind the player, copying every movement, yes, all of them, forcing the player to move constantly. Husk will only activate if the player has moved during a round, which starts the spawning process where it waits 3.5 seconds after movement, the spawning animation takes 1.2 seconds, and the Husk mimics the player's movement 1.2 seconds behind. Husk will follow the player's movement, killing if touched at all. Husk is one of the current 5 client-sided entities. You cannot see others' Husks, and they cannot see nor be affected by yours. Ideally, you should obviously continue moving whilst attempting not to overlap your path too much. If approaching a path to a dead end, try to stay as much on the side of the tile as possible to make backtracking easier. Elsewise, you could jump over your Husk if absolutely necessary. All of the methods should help initially, without limiting your options. Jumping over Husk, trailing aside, or just not choosing Husk works in most cases. If you figure to struggle with pathing, try buying a trail to help keep track of your movement. It should make dealing with Husk a whole bunch easier. Next up we have Baby. Baby is an enemy, and the final one from the level 1 starting pool, that can appear starting at level 1. It constantly dashes straight towards the nearest player. Baby will lock onto the nearest player, creating a red dash line in front of itself to indicate where it's about to dash towards. An audio cue will play at the same time during this. While it is locking on, Baby will not move and will instead display itself winding up their attack. Baby cannot move outside of dashes, and the dash has a fixed range that cannot be any longer or shorter than its indicated line. The best possible option to avoid Baby is by moving out of its dash line, as it cannot curve or remodify once the line has appeared. Personal recommendation not to pick Baby until after you've got a few speed modifiers. It can be quite troublesome without them. If in a bigger lobby, note that the Baby can and will switch targets if a player is close enough. Always be on your guard whenever you see its line or hear it nearby. Even if it's attacking someone else, you're liable to getting caught within the crossfire. Unfortunately, at the time of creation of this video, nil is removed, so I won't be covering them. Next up, Telefragger. Telefragger is an enemy that can appear starting at level 8 forward. Telefragger acts as a reverse Baby, attacking the player from in front, which is cued by a blaring sound. If the player's graphics are high enough, a black shadowing aura will appear around Telefragger, making him much easier to spot. Moving at a speed of 6 studs a second, Telefragger kills on contact. It also locks on to a single target which periodically changes. Telefragger teleports every 7 seconds, emitting a sound cue and particles around the player right before teleporting in front of the target a set distance away. They have loud footsteps to assist with indicating their position. Utilizing the knowledge of its teleports, you can potentially better plays in scenarios where you may not be eligible to swiftly react given that Telefragger targets a player, depending on momentum to potentially better its chances of ending the player. Telefragger is one of the easier later level enemies if played against correctly. Moving on to the medium section in terms of enemies, first we have Flesh. I set Flesh within this category because it can be extremely dangerous if put within the right scenario. I witnessed too many people die from failing to survive its infectious tiles. Flesh is an enemy that appears after level 5, infecting any nearby tiles and players that touch its Flesh tiles. Slowly moves towards the nearest player and kills on contact. Flesh infects nearby tiles, turning them red and fleshy. Infected tiles slow those on it, and touching infected tiles inflicts Flesh on the player for a short period of time. Infected players have a red aura with flesh dripping from their body. While infected, players are slower and incapable of using their ability. Any tile they touch in this state becomes infected. When a player is no longer infected, they are invulnerable to infected tiles for a few seconds. If an infected player rings the bell, it will remove infected effects. Flesh moves faster while on infected tiles. Jumping on infected tiles which slow the player can assist combating the slowness inflicted with infection. Flesh is one of the lesser difficult enemies within this sector, but important to note nonetheless due to factors of which can make its presence deadly for the unsuspecting. Next up we have Guardian. Guardian is an enemy that can appear by level 8. It dashes near players and fires projectiles. Guardian isn't difficult to deal with, but its small bullets are able to sneak up on players while dealing with other threats. Guardian produces a loud sound cue when it moves and prepares to fire. Guardian isn't difficult to deal with, but its small bullets are able to sneak up on players while dealing with other threats, hence why it's in this category. Zooming out the camera can make it easier to see the projectiles earlier so they can be dodged. In other words, it's advised to keep continuously moving when dealing with Guardian.
Note that only Guardian's projectiles kill upon contact, and they cannot pass through solid objects.
They shouldn't cause you much trouble unless given difficult scenarios. Operator. Operator is a client-sided enemy that can appear by level 5, forcing the player to let go of all keys and abilities to disappear, attacking the player otherwise. Operator appears on the left side of the player's screen as a green face at random, with a ding upon its appearance, and another ding once it detects that the player has all inputs released or isn't moving. Operator upon his own is fairly easy given that you have a bit of time before he decimates. However, when paired with other entities like Husk and Baby, he can be difficult for the unsuspecting. It's advised to generally stop instantly when he appears if you can. Elsewise, stop as soon as you're safe to. To counter it, the player has to become still at least once within 3 seconds. If they use any input during its encounter, Operator's face will turn yellow as a warning to stop. And if the player continues to use any inputs until 3 seconds have passed, Operator's face will turn red. By that point, there's barely any time left for the player to stop, and it usually results with an instant death. Operator's kill check happens at around 11 ticks, leaving players with 2.5 seconds to stop. If you time these ticks effectively, you can manage Operator efficiently. Kolona. Kolona is a client-sided enemy which starts appearing by level 10 for choice within the enemy's pool. Kolona activates periodically, displaying a number and then counting up from 0. Players must use their ability once the timer reaches the aforementioned number. When it begins counting, it will appear on the left-hand side of the screen and the pillar will rotate slightly with each count. When counting up, players will have to be using their ability when it shows their destination number which they got at the start. Succeeding to do so will get rid of Kolona and surviving. When the player fails to do so, Kolona will turn its wreath red while also speeding up its column. Then, after a short period, will kill the player. Abilities can still be used even before the counting reaches the destination number. Therefore, as long as the ability is activated when the destination number appears, it will still count and make Kolona disappear. When infected by flesh, it will cover Kolona in flesh and will pause the timer until the flesh wears off, which can, if utilized correctly, be useful. Overall, I'd suggest making sure to take a mental note of the number, or being ready for their attacking strike. You have a slight wind-up if you miss the number before they attack you. Kolona will always strike between numbers 5, which is its lowest, and 15, which is its highest. Sigil. Sigil is an enemy that can appear starting at level 15. It dashes around the map to different spots, similarly to Guardian, and fires a continuous beam that follows players around. This beam can be extremely dangerous as it appears for all players in a round, and can interfere with other players' gameplay, which is also referred to as PvPscape. Sigil targets a nearby player and locks onto them, as indicated by glyphic symbols appearing around the target. After charging up for a few seconds, Sigil will then fire a giant laser aimed directly towards its target, which slowly turns towards them until it expires. To players that are not currently being targeted by Sigil, the beam will become 3 times smaller. Players are advised to avoid each other as much as possible, since collateral damage is very likely while Sigil is active. Treat it like another Guardian. When targeted by Sigil's beam, it is recommended to circle either clockwise or counterclockwise around Sigil to avoid the beam. If the player is near Sigil when the beam starts, it is reasonable to attempt using verticality with a slight circling to escape the beam rather than just purely circling, as it can give you more distance, along with advantage. Voidbreaker, VB, or Voidbreaker, is a client-sided enemy that can appear starting at level 15. Voidbreaker occasionally fades in around the player, facing towards them to indicate the upcoming attack. Right after, Voidbreaker will lift their blade, summoning a sword around the player. When a sword is summoned, there is a brief moment before it lunges forward to stab the player, who has to avoid the blades by getting out of the sword's direction. Voidbreaker's swords cannot be dodged by jumping or falling, and the swords can also be obscured by walls or slopes, so it's important to make sure to be in an open area while dodging them. It's extremely easy to deal with Voidbreaker alone, but given their standpoint within the level pool, they are often paired with other enemies and can induce dangerous situations. Moving up to the difficult section of this video, we firstly have Voidbound Baby. Voidbound Baby is an enemy that requires 2 permanent babies to appear starting from level 10. It is a much faster variant of Baby. Voidbound Baby's dashes, however, are faster than Baby's and have a much longer dash distance. Given that they are much faster than Baby, players are advised to keep a consistent pacing and focus upon them, given that Voidbound Baby's audio cue is muffled and quieter, so it's harder to tell when Voidbound Baby is attacking. Most often, new players struggle to keep up with Voidbound Baby's pace, as they are unsuspecting. I will note that I personally advise not to pick Voidbound Baby before speed upgrades, as it significantly increases the difficulty. Voidbound Guardian. Voidbound Guardian is an enemy that can appear starting at level 20 if a permanent Guardian has been obtained beforehand. It is a deadlier variant of Guardian that fires larger bullets that explode into beams on impact. Voidbound Guardian attacks similarly to Guardian, but it fires an extra shot. Its bullets are faster and it explodes in beams when touching a surface. The cooldowns between dashes and attacks are shortened, requiring more focus into dodging. Well, bullets gain speed when they change direction. It's advised also to not get Voidbound Guardian until after you get, if you can, the Speedy Shoes upgrade. All Voidbound variants of enemies work similarly to their original counterparts, though Operator, who has a slight change of pacing, works slightly different. It's just suggested you're prepared and assured for their arrival in your runs. Cadence. Cadence is a passive enemy that can appear starting at level 15. It spawns instruments randomly around the map that cause them to slowly become enraged. While enraged, it chases after and kills every player in the level without a chance for recovery. Cadence starts off in a passive state where it can't move nor kill players. A constant ticking noise will play, which intensifies based on its timer. When passive, an instrument will spawn near a player every 25 seconds, 30 seconds if there are 2+ instruments, indicated by a sound cue at its spawn point alongside a chain with black electricity-like beam around it, connecting the instrument and Cadence. Additionally, the spawn rate of instruments scales with the amount of players alive. Having 2 or more uncollected instruments decreases the timer. Otherwise, the timer will increase. In solo, this timer starts and caps out at 50 seconds. If the timer expires, Cadence becomes enraged and chases the nearest player at a speed of 80 studs per second, killing on contact. In other words, 4+ instruments is the equivalent of a game over. This continues until enough instruments are collected for the timer to go back up, or there are no targets left. Instruments will not spawn while Cadence is enraged. Due to the importance of keeping Cadence at bay, players should prioritize collecting instruments over gifts when it appears. It is barely possible to outrun Cadence with most movement upgrades and class abilities, so it is not instantly over when Cadence enrages. However, it becomes crucially important to locate and collect the instruments to make Cadence calm again. Here's what happens if you do, however, fail to captivate all the instruments in time. This is Cadence's warning. It signals to get instruments ASAP. As for enemies, we have Scrapmaw. Scrapmaw is a client-sided enemy that can appear starting at level 20. Every 20 to 30 seconds, Scrapmaw will dash in front of the player, indicated by the sound of a loud train horn and a bright orange beam appearing a few seconds before arriving. Scrapmaw will linger for a few seconds before dashing away and despawning, dealing contact damage while present. After Scrapmaw's initial dash, it will spawn a row of lasers, indicated by long orange beams which appear on either side of Scrapmaw's body. These lasers are parallel to each other and spawn in a random direction, moving up and down with the player. It is advised not to waste extra jumps on Scrapmaw, as since they are locked to vertical movement, it will not help with surviving them. With enough speed, it is possible to get out of the laser's range entirely, as they do not cover the entire map. It is advised not to waste extra jumps on Scrapmaw, as since they are locked to vertical movement, it will not help with surviving them.
The easiest way for countering Scrapmaw is to ensure you are not in their direct line of travel, nor the beams they spawn.
Scrapmaw tends to catch players off guard given its abrupt attack. Staying poised can help with this.
Moving on to the next section of this video, Greater Curse enemies. I put enemies in air quotes given that they're labeled as Greater Curses. Razorbloom. Razorbloom is a Greater Curse enemy that will land on player's head at random and stay there. After a random amount of seconds,
it will open its face to reveal a mouth with many teeth and begin to scream. If it screams for long enough, it will decapitate the player, killing them. Players can use jump pads or grapple points while Razorbloom is screaming to counter it, causing Razorbloom to fly away. It will not fly away if it is not screaming.
They're, in my opinion, one of if not the easiest curse enemy to deal with as long as you get to a jump pad in time. Lastly, Voidbound Operator. Voidbound Operator appears after a Greater Curse Malfunction is chosen. Malfunction turns Operator into its Voidbound version. Like the normal Operator, the Voidbound variant appears on the player's screen. After spawning, it will attempt to attack at specific intervals, signaled by its face glowing and a unique sound cue. The intervals after Voidbound Operator's first attack are consistent, being 12 ticks. Once Operator attacks once, it is possible to get into a rhythm and counter it easily afterward. If counting, only count after the attack is done. Ticks during its attack don't count. If you are still worried about keeping the timing up, there is also an option to just tiptoe forward, which will take care of it without much trouble. Be mindful that this, however, becomes more difficult if multiple enemies are on you all at once. And that pretty much sums up all the adversaries in-game as of patch 5, aside from Celestial, who I intend to make a separate video on. Thanks for sticking around. I hope this helps you out, even if it's just a little bit. If you've made it this far, please consider subscribing. This video took me quite some time to make, and I'd appreciate it. Also, feel free to comment on anything I may have missed. Thanks for watching. Peace out.